It is Friday on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Happy to be back for another day. Hope you guys are having a great day out there today. Really good show coming up. Aaron Gleeman, baseball writer, longtime baseball podcaster. You probably know him from Gleeman and The Geek. Will join me here in a little bit talking Twins. Known Aaron for a long time, but excited to have him on the show today. Lots to dig into with him. This offseason is interesting, to say the least. I don't know if the Twins have any better idea of their direction than we do, but that leads to all sorts of excellent speculation opportunities. So we'll get into trade possibilities. Is Byron Buxton one of those candidates? Is it not just, the pitchers we've been hearing about, Joe Ryan, Pablo Lopez? Is Byron Buxton's name in that mix? What do we make of payroll? Who might they sign this offseason out of the bargain bin, more than likely? What is the plan? We'll get into all of that here in just a few minutes with Aaron. It's a busy weekend. It's been kind of a lull of kind of not much happening in the last couple days as far as live events go for the Minnesota teams, even though this is kind of that season where a lot is happening. But that will change soon. So we got some Twins news at the end of the show, and we'll kind of recap what is coming up this weekend as well. First, though, what did I miss? I'm going to start with the Loons today. Minnesota United and Major League Soccer making news on Thursday. They have flipped the schedule. We are going to go now to basically a fall schedule, if you can call it that. I mean, the MLS schedule is almost interminable anyway. So basically they're saying we're going to take off a month and a half or 2 months in summer instead of, have the off time be in the winter. And they're flipping the schedule. So starting in 2027, it's a little confusing. 2027 is going to be like a shortened regular season. So everybody gets enough of a break. It's going to be a shortened regular season. And then kind of fall, late summer 2027 is when kind of this new scheduling format kicks in. So basically it's going to go from like July until May, from how I understand it. And then all of June will be off. Training camps probably start in July. Teams that are eliminated obviously will have more time off than that. But basically, when this was being discussed, for the last, 6 months at least, and we've had John Marthaler on to talk about this, and I think John will be on next week at some point as well to talk about this and to set up the Loons playoff game against San Diego. That's still a little ways out. We talked about this. I'm like, the thing I didn't understand is how is this going to work in a market like Minnesota and similar markets, but we're one of the coldest markets in Major League Soccer. We're one of the coldest markets in any sport. Doesn't really matter in the NBA, doesn't matter in the NHL because they play inside, but it matters in baseball when the calendar keeps kind of expanding. You get more playoffs, things go deeper into the year, things like that. And it certainly matters in soccer now that you're talking about going away from like a March through October regular season and then playoffs in November, and then it can stretch into early December for MLS Cup. If we're talking about flipping that, how is it going to work? How are you going to play through the winter when you have a lot of markets that are cold? Well, we got some answers, and I think they are borderline satisfactory. They're basically going to take a break. They didn't say exactly how long, but they're saying like mid-December until early to mid-February, where there's not going to be MLS games. They're going to take a break, like a holiday break, a cold weather break, and then get back to it. So if you take those like 6 to 8 weeks out of the equation, you take probably the 6 to 8 coldest weeks that we have of winter out of the equation. Now, it could certainly be it certainly can be cold in early December. It certainly can be cold after February 15th. Like anybody who's lived in Minnesota for any amount of time knows that it can be sub-zero during those times. But basically the coldest, I always think of December 15th to February 15th as like, that's the real time we have to withstand. Everything before that, you're still going to get some nice days. Like here, as I talk on November 14th, it's going to be almost 70 degrees in the Twin Cities. So we get nice days still up until, mid to late November. And then even into early December, you can have those 50-degree, 55-degree days pop up. Same thing with late February. Again, not going to be all the time, though. There's going to be cold games here. But if they can finesse this so that they're not playing in those coldest, the coldest of the cold, and then maybe round off those edges with road games. Maybe you're playing a road-heavy schedule at the beginning part of December and the early part of February. So you're really maybe only having 1 or 2 games that are really in like the danger zone of where you would not want to be playing, where fans are going to be bundled up, where you could have the potential for really, really cold. I feel like it works. I mean, they're saying basically that the whole schedule will be almost like 90% in the footprint of the current schedule. It's just kind of flipping around the start and getting to a point where it's lining up better with the transfer windows, the international transfer windows. It's lining up better with international breaks. You're going to have your playoffs when it's starting to warm up, not when it's getting really cold. So it makes sense. We're going to have to see how it works, though. 2027 will be a real test case to see how this is working, to see how this really does play out in MLS. How does this work for Minnesota? How is this going to work for fans? I think they're rightly concerned right now that there are going to be more cold weather games for them. The flip side is like, markets where it's hot, you don't want to be playing in June and early July. You don't want to be playing then. So I get it. I think this is going to be interesting to see. I want to see how this impacts Minnesota, whether there's enough there. I mean, they've said, hey, we're not playing inside. We're going to play these games at Allianz Field, regardless. So see how this all plays out. I don't think you're going to have a whole lot more cold than you do right now. Like certainly November is going to be dicey. If you have any home games in February, that's going to be dicey. But they've already had home games in early March. They've, depending on how they would perform, they've never really had to do this, but they could have home matches into November for playoffs, things like that. So the possibility was always there. This puts it more into play in the regular season. November is going to be the one that I want to watch because November can go either way. This November's been pretty nice so far. Obviously, if they had a match today, that would be great. But playing into mid-December, you're going to have a lot of give and take. You're going to have a lot of road games, kind of like what they do with the Twins. They try to start the Twins on the road at the beginning of the year for cold and also so they don't get rainouts, things like that. We'll have to see how it works. I'm intrigued. The thing that I was worried about is like, what are you going to do for December, January, and February? They seem to have a plan for that, taking that break of 6 to 8 weeks. That takes the biggest worry I have out of play. Now we have to see how the rest falls into place. I swear when I was kind of booking these guests, I didn't like intentionally do a back-to-back. I'm kind of dipping my toes into some different guest categories, territories, but Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic and also the Gleeman and the Geek podcast, very popular. Happy to have him on right now. Aaron, how you doing?
I'm good. Once you get into that athletic talent pool,
yes,
it's hard not to just keep diving further into it, keep swimming further into
it. It is. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, that's what people always say.
We had John Krasinski on yesterday, of course. I think I'll have Russo on at some point too, former colleague of mine, of course, at the Star Tribune, now with The Athletic. We got a lot to talk about Twins-wise, man, Aaron. This is they're making news for us. They're making talkers for us. We don't have to look too hard to figure out what to say about these guys. I mean, they hired a new manager. They're filling out their coaching staff. They're at the GM meetings for this week, and they're just kind of like, hey, we still don't know what we're up to payroll-wise, but maybe come talk to us in a little while. Sounds like anybody and everybody could get traded, including Byron Buxton. We don't know exactly where that's all headed, but what do you make of the precarious state of the Twins before we get into more specifics?
It has been odd because there's been two like full media availabilities. There was the one the day after they fired Baldelli, which was like the season-ending thing. Now it's 5 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago, and then there was one at the after the Shelton press conference, which was last week. And Derek Falvey, like in side sessions, was asked repeatedly basically the same questions in both, even though they were 6 weeks apart, and gave kind of the same tap dance answers, which is this team going to try to win or even like be competitive next year? And within that, what's is the payroll going down more? Is it going to be? And he not only kind of danced around that, the first time he said in I guess late September, he said, well, we don't need to know that yet. We don't need to know that because there's still a month of playoffs. But then playoffs end, he gets asked the same questions and he's like, well, actually, we don't really need to know that yet because, stuff doesn't really happen until like December or January.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, there's some truth to that. Baseball's offseason is, notoriously like molasses slow. But I mean, like you said, he's at the GM meetings right now. I guarantee people are asking him, are you guys got pitching to trade? What's Buxton's situation? Like, the rest of the league is not going to just wait for the Pohlads to hand down whatever the payroll edict is for him. So it puts them in a really weird position. And the fact that he won't give any sort of, substantial answers on the payroll front when their payroll is like under 90 million right now.
Yeah. That's committed to whatever they've committed to next year.
Right. And even the last 2 years, 3 years ago, they had $160 million payroll. Last 2 years, it's been in the 130, 135 range. They right-sized it. Even if it stays in that range, you'd have like 40, 45, $50 million to spend, which for the Minnesota Twins is an incredible, buying power. And, maybe we'll get into, they have some very clear weaknesses, turns out, when you finish with the worst record in baseball over the last 2 months. But so the fact that he won't even kind of say, yeah, we have the ability to add, on a mid-tier level, which he typically has done in the past, it does tell me something's a little wonky here, or the answers that he can give are just such frustrating negative answers that he's just kind of trying to dance around them.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Like, should we be concerned about this, the limited partners who we haven't heard about yet? These guys that are supposed to come in and kind of rescue the debt to a certain degree and kind of stabilize things to kind of get them back on an upward trajectory. Is that more precarious than we've been led to believe? Or is it just like they've taken so much bad PR in the last couple of years by being honest, but being like probably too honest and being like, yeah, we're right sizing the payroll. No, we're not adding anybody else, kind of stuff, where it's just like they know, but they're not telling us.
I mean, I think there is an element of that, especially now that Falvey has the dual role where he's not only president of baseball operations, but he's just president of business too. I mean, he's taken on Dave St. Peter's old role and kept his baseball role. It's not as plausible for him to be like, hey, that's above my pay grade. You are the pay grade.
It's at the pay grade. Yeah.
Right. And so part of me, as I stand there and, 10 feet away as he says this stuff, I'm like, that doesn't really pass the smell test. But even if you are willing to give him the benefit of the doubt on that, like they should not be in a position where they can't add. Like I said, I mean, even if they have a $120 million payroll, they have $25-30 million that they can add. And I think to your point about the limited partners, we've gotten so many questions about that because they've done an incredibly good job of not revealing that information, which then, as months go by, that leads people to speculate that something has gone wayward with that process. I think it's always been a situation where we weren't going to learn those names unless MLB votes on them, which comes at the end of the month at like the owners meetings.
Got it.
It's possible that gets revealed before then, obviously, but it does make me think some of the answers from Falvey where it's like, hey, we need to talk to, more, there are more voices involved now. He's clearly sort of hinting at that aspect of it, where it's not just going into Joe Pohlad's office and saying, how much do I have to spend? Now there might be some other people involved, but also that was months ago. And if there isn't a holdup in that process, and if the initial reporting and the press releases that they put out about these limited partners coming in are still accurate, why have you not at least hashed out some sort of plan and some sort of basic idea of the spending? And so the fact as this drags on, and the truth is we're going to start to see trades and signings. I mean, there will be some this week, next week. They might not be the biggest ones, and the Twins have made some moves early in off seasons too. So you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. You're increasing the degree of difficulty for sure, at the very least.
Derek Shelton is the new manager. He seemed satisfied by whatever answer he was given about payroll. He said that at his news conference last week. He's starting to assemble his staff, and I like some of that so far. My colleague Bobby Nightingale reported they had like an initial list of like 80 guys. Like, well, I mean, is that, I don't know how many of those were serious candidates, but they got that quickly down to 7, which got down to 3, which got them down to a guy that probably was at close to the top of the list at the start anyway, because he's a guy that was here before. He's got managerial experience. He makes a certain amount of sense. What do you think about that hire? What does it say about kind of where they think they're at right now and some of his staff too?
I mean, I think he's a solid hire. I think 6 bad years in Pittsburgh, it's not something to tout, obviously, and it does suggest he doesn't have some like secret formula for winning in dire circumstances, but everyone loses in Pittsburgh for 30 years now. And so I don't necessarily hold that against him. You hope, obviously, he took some stuff from that he can change, he can learn from. I mean, he's certainly a well-respected baseball lifer. He was the bench coach under Baldelli in 2019. He's worked as a hitting coach for 15 years in the majors for some of the best organizations, Cleveland, Tampa Bay, etc. And it is funny to be like, I have no doubt that they had a 80-person list. I mean, Bobby's reporting is right on there, but it is funny to be like, yeah, we had this at 80 people, and what do you know? We ended up with the person everyone would have predicted on day one of this entire thing.
Our two finalists were the two guys that we know already, Rousing and
it's a very Twins way of doing things in the last couple of years, which is we have these we talk big and we have these ideas for innovation, and we just kind of end up with the familiar stuff.
Right.
But it's not an exciting hire, certainly. And, his record in Pittsburgh is, historically terrible, obviously. What I wonder about is he being viewed as just sort of a placeholder here?
Yeah.
We talked about all the roster stuff, and I don't personally give them a very high chance of being competitive in 2026. Certainly if you trade Lopez, Ryan, Buxton, any combo, you're handing him a roster that is going to be very Pittsburgh-esque. Without Paul Skeens, by the way. And so, what chance are you really giving him? And if that's the case, is he more of we like him, we know he can handle difficult circumstances, maybe he can push some individual players to improve with communication and relationships, but also if we're going to be bad for a couple, 2-3 years, we're not going to go hire some big name manager. Why not bring in somebody that we're familiar with, that we're comfortable with, that we like as a person? And he checks all those boxes. I think there are, in different circumstances, this might be a situation where people would be like, this is kind of underwhelming, and it is, but also if the team they're giving him is underwhelming and the big picture of this franchise is underwhelming, they may view it as just like, let him sort of steer the ship. We're not really looking to travel that far at this point.
I defined this a few days ago as the era of pleasant mediocrity. And I mean, it's not to say they can't be better. It's not to say that he can't help them be better or that he's the wrong guy for the moment, because he does have that history of player development as a hitting coach. Like that's the most important thing right now is, it'd be, I'm sure they would love to win next season. This probably goes hand in hand with development, but like their hitting prospects stalled. They did, and it's for whatever reason, and you can blame the on-field staff. You can blame whatever. You can blame scouting for whatever happened once they finally got to this level. But like they have got to do a better job of developing the guys that are already here, like Royce Lewis, Brooks Lees, those guys, but also the next wave coming up. Make sure that those guys have a chance when they get here. So that's more important. That will go hand in hand with winning, but that to me is why he's here, right? Because he and the staff they're assembling probably have to be more in teacher mode than Rocco Baldelli was in 2019.
Yeah, I think that's true. And, he has a specific hitting background, whereas Baldelli had never been a hitting coach. It's difficult, I think, for a manager to be that involved in like swing mechanics of individual players, which is why you're trusting your staff, and their 3 hitting coaches are sort of in flux here. It hasn't been said at this point whether they'll be back or not. Obviously, last year at this time, they had just fired David Popkins, who went to the Blue Jays and made the World Series with them. So that hasn't looked great. But yeah, I agree. I mean, that is the biggest thing for them. Like they have a lot of weaknesses on this roster, but bigger picture, the weakness is they've had tons of young hitting talent. A lot of them have been top prospects, and some of them have even had immediate success in the majors, but they have really had an inability to turn talented young hitters into good veteran hitters.
Exactly.
And I have no doubt that they believe Shelton can push them forward on that. But what I will say is, if you go back and read or talk to people that covered him in Pittsburgh, the same criticisms that were leveled against Baldelli at the end here, from a player development standpoint, but also like, pulling starters too early, platooning too much, lacking fundamentals. Those were all things that were levied against Shelton in Pittsburgh. Now, again, Pittsburgh turns everyone into a mess and has for 30 years, but the Twins are sort of trending into Pirates territory in terms of talent, in terms of spending, in terms of investment from the front office. So I just feel like I get why he took the job. There's only 30 of them. He even said something along those lines and I get that he thinks I'd like to prove I can be a good manager. I get why they hired him, but I just wonder, is it going to be a situation where 2 years from now, people are like, I don't know if he was good or bad, because what did he have to work with, really?
I want to get into some specific roster stuff in a minute, because you brought up 3 big names, and Buxton's name got thrown into that mix a little bit more seriously with reporting from Dan Hayes this week that there's a source saying, hey, he might consider waiving that no trade clause, and that that would take the payroll and the competitive spirit into a different category. But bigger picture, baseball wise, I just kind of keep coming back to the idea that the economics of baseball are a mess. Like, does it even make sense for the Twins to try to go in 1 year right now? Because this is all gonna, I'm sure they're hoping, and a lot of teams like them are hoping, that by the end of next year, I don't think they don't want there to be a work stoppage, but like something's got to happen then, and that this economic model has to change in a way that they can be more, sustainably competitive. So is there kind of a sentiment of, okay, let's just bide our time for a year, see where the economics go, and then regroup for 2027 and beyond? Is that a smart play, even if it's an underwhelming play?
Yeah, I mean, that has become kind of my assumption, not just in terms of on the field with the roster, but once the Pohleds took the team off the market after 10 months, my thought was they have decided to kind of assume the next collective bargaining agreement will be more friendly towards mid and low market teams, which it can't get less friendly. So that's probably a safe assumption. And, you have the uncertain national TV situation with all the contracts coming up. They clearly think, and I think this is probably a decent bet, that teams like the Twins will be in a better or at least less bad situation in the next CBA. Now, whether that includes a missed season, whether that include, who knows? It could, like you said, it could just be a mess. That has kind of become my assumption of like, why do the Pohleds not want to sell this thing? Why are they taking on limited partners, which dilutes their share of the team? If they eventually do sell it, even if they get more, they're getting a smaller slice of that pie. It doesn't really connect, other than they've just decided this is just a bad time to be a mid-market or a low-market team on the field, off the field, everything, and maybe we can bide our time. What I will say, though, on the on-field front is they're going to play a 2026 season, and it's not as if the Twins were going to be in position to sign another Carlos Correa or even Josh Donaldson type of long-term 4, 5, 6-year deal. They could very easily just sign helpful veteran players to 1-year deals, or even acquire guys who are, in the arbitration process with no guaranteed money past 2026. And so if a lockout does happen, you don't have that on the books anyway. And then the other thing to consider is nobody gets paid during the lockout. So even if they did have some of those contracts on the books, it wouldn't really matter. I mean, I don't want to say they're rooting for a lockout, but if their claims about losing money year after year are true, the lockout isn't such a bad thing, because at least you sort of break even during that point. So I think that is my assumption on the ownership and franchise level, is that the upcoming CBA is playing a big part. And maybe that, trickles down to the on-field roster level. But I also think it shouldn't stop you, or at least it wouldn't need to stop you from putting together a competitive team just for 2026.
I think it's a good point. Buxton is interesting. Pablo Lopez is interesting because he's obviously very good pitcher, but he's coming off a season where he was hurt a lot. Joe Ryan is very interesting because he's a really good pitcher, but he's hit a little bit of a wall each of these years at the end, but he's low cost control. Everybody wants that, including the Twins. So you add up all those salaries. Pablo's going to make 21.5, and he's got 2 years left on his deal. Buxton's got 3 for 15 each, so 3 for 45, and then Joe Ryan's supposed to make about 6 next year. So that's 37.5 with all of them. I don't think they're going to trade all of them, but I don't know. I don't put it past them. What's the likelihood of each of them 2 out of 3, and what's the difference between what you think they'll do and what you would do?
I mean, the moment they trade one of those 3, I kind of feel like rip the Band-Aid off. And I'm not saying that's
the other 2 are marching into Falvey's office and saying, okay, I see where this is headed. Trade me, right?
There's that factor too, which is the Buxton situation might already be coming to that point. And I know Joe Ryan was very frustrated. He talked on the record, on camera about this a few times after the deadline. I think, that is essentially 40% of their payroll right now is those 3 guys.
Yeah.
They all would have some degree of significant trade value. I think probably Ryan would have the most, Buxton second most, and Lopez because of the injury situation in the contract, like you said. But they can absolutely get something significant for all 3 of them. My thing is, you got 2 frontline starters and an all-star center fielder, and you claim to have some good young pieces, and you currently have an $88 million payroll. Why would you not go sign a first baseman, a DH, some relievers, whatever, for 35, 40 million total, and try to get a wild card spot next year? Try to be competitive in what is almost always a pretty underwhelming AL Central. But, being realistic, I have felt since the trade deadline fire sale that they're going to pick up kind of where they left off at that point. And the one weird factor is Lopez did not get traded, but he was injured. He was in the middle of what proved to be like a 3.5-month shoulder injury. And so they couldn't have traded him. I mean, they technically could have, but they were never going to get value for him.
Yeah.
So we don't know how the Lopez situation would have panned out at the trade deadline. We do know that they were at least fielding offers on Joe Ryan. The Red Sox thing was reported, all that. And then the Buxton situation, he made it clear, like, I'm not going anywhere. I have a no trade. But if they've kind of pushed him to the brink and they've, broken his loyalty, which has been incredible over the years, well, then you're in a situation where it's like, if you're going to trade Lopez, at which point you've traded one of your 3 kind of all-star caliber players and your payroll now is in the 70-something million dollar range.
Yeah.
Well, you could say, well, that opens up money to go invest in some veterans, but why? What veterans? They're not going to be as good as Pablo Lopez. And so my feeling since the deadline and, what's happened over the last couple of months hasn't changed. That is, if they do one, and I think Lopez would probably be the most likely for the factors we just kind of touched on. If you trade Lopez, why are you not trading Ryan? And if you trade Lopez and Ryan, I'm not saying why aren't you trading Buxton, but I would not blame Buxton at all if, like you said, he walks into somebody's office and goes, why am I here? Like, what is this anymore? And, he's 32. He's got 3 years left. That might be it for him as a star player, just from normal aging. Does he want to be in this situation? And he's been incredibly loyal. Like I said, everybody asks him everywhere he goes, do you want to be traded? And he has said years now, no, absolutely not. I love it here. I'm sticking with them. But, everyone has a limit. And if you just look around and every good player keeps getting traded, does he want to be the one guy who just looks around and it's a bunch of minimum salaried young guys probably winning 73 games or something? I wouldn't blame him at all. I do think that would be extremely sad. Like that he's finally reached a point in his 30s where he's healthy, he's living up to the potential. He's, by the way, signed for like half of what the market rate would be. And we're still in a spot where every day people are asking about if he's going to be traded.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, he finally had the year last year that everybody always wanted for him. And it was like, at some points, like, he was the only reason to show up and watch this team. They were winning some games last year, and we kind of forget sometimes they were 34-27 at one point before Lopez got hurt, and then the wheels fall off. They trade everybody. Even going into the All-Star break, there was like, hey, couple hot weeks, they might be buyers, not sellers, and stuff like that. And just, I was at that Colorado game right out of the break where Chris Paddock went double, triple homer. As we were just settling into our seats at Coors Field as he went double, triple homer, and it was kind of all off to the races from there. But you're right. Like he's at his peak value, right? Like you would be selling as high as you possibly could, even though he's 32 because of the year he just had. But it's finally the year we've always been wanting him to have. And he's like sometimes the only reason to show up and watch a game, maybe outside of Luke Keyshaw or if they've got a good pitcher going. But I'm saying, I think your point is an interesting one. Like, it could kind of feel like an all or nothing at a certain point where if you trade one, maybe that's going to be 3, or if you trade nobody, then that's nobody. So it could be 3 or 0. But with Buxton, it's just kind of fascinating because who's going to go to these games next year? I mean, who might go anyway? But like, if you trade all these guys, like, who's going to be at Target Field next year? Like, the beat writers and the 12 diehards who will never be mad at the poll ads no matter what. Like, who's going to be there?
Yeah, it is. I've written a lot about payroll and a lot about attendance, and I get a lot of questions.
They love when you do that, don't they?
Yes,
they love when you do that.
They really do. Although they've been getting less mad when I do that because now everyone is upset about it. So it's like I have to pick a new thing to stand out in my anger. But I think, unfortunately, fan morale, attendance, winning is at such a low point that you could make the argument of like they could do anything negative at this point and it can only drop so much further.
Right.
Like, they've already had the lowest attendance in 25 years. Like, it will be lower next year, but it's not like they're not going to sell, over 1 million tickets. So, which it stinks that that's the case, where you're almost incentivizing leaning further into negative things, because it's like, well, we're already at rock bottom here. It could slightly go a little,
just dig a little bit more,
right? The Buxton thing, yes, they could get significant value for him. I don't think that's really in question. I just think, and if you're going to have a bad team for the next 2 years and you have a 32-year-old signed for 3 more years, it's logical to be like, well, maybe he should be somewhere else and maybe we should get younger players for him. But like you said, I mean, he is by far the most popular Twins player. I believe he's one of the just most talented, when healthy, best all-around Twins players in decades at this point. He's also extremely fun to just watch do things on the field, and also has never had any issue off the field, has said and done all the right things, has a family that is constantly in Minnesota saying good things, contributing to charities. Like, he is just a great player. And seemingly, I'm not going to claim I know Byron Buxton. He's not my best friend or something, but every interaction I've had with him has been great. He's popular for all the right reasons. He's making $15 million a year, which is not even one of the highest 100 salaries in Major League Baseball at this point. And so the only reason you would even entertain trading him is if you've gotten to a point of running a team where you're just counting on not being competitive, and you're willing to just, why do we need anybody who's good at this stage? Why do we need anybody who could fetch down the road value instead of present day value? And that's all, from a cold logic standpoint, I think there's plenty of to that. But from you got to get people to actually care about this team and spend money on this team and want to watch this team and have players to cheer for. What are you if you trade Pablo Lopez and Byron Buxton and Joe Ryan, and you can tout all the prospects you want, but the team on the field would be horrendous at that point. And morale is already at an all-time low. And I just worry there's a difference, I think, between, and I'm someone who came up watching them in the mid 90s. There is a difference between an angry fan base and an apathetic, checked out fan base.
There is.
They are right on the verge of pushing everyone to that with, some of these moves that we're talking about.
Be a hell of a tagline for their 26 advertising slogan, the Minnesota Twins. Why do we need anybody good anymore? I don't think they're going to go with that, but
people should definitely keep an eye on the advertising. It's leaning so far from the actual game of baseball and so into, hey, Target Field's fun and you can drink here and bring, which it's true. Target Field is fun, but I am very curious to see over the next several months or even the beginning of the season, are they even going to show players in some of these advertisements? Because what happened was they had to redo all their ads and even all their Jumbotron stuff.
All their banners, at
the trade deadline. And I know behind the scenes, I talked to some people who were involved in that, and they were like, this is challenging because everything had, Willie Castro and, John Duran and all this stuff.
Shimmying up the light pole to get those pennants down with the players' faces on them. Hey, Aaron, a couple more things before we go. I promised you we wouldn't do Gleeman and the Geek length hour and 47 minutes. We go shorter on daily delivery, but you did a list of at least 10 bargain basement hitters. I don't know if your pitcher list is out yet, but guys that they could realistically, if they're trying to be faux competitive next season, go and get to kind of fill out some of these empty holes on their roster that were left from trades and beyond. One thing I was going to ask you before that, I just remembered, is there a way can they trade, can they dump the remaining Carlos Correa salary in a Buxton or a Joe Ryan deal? Can they do that? Is that allowable?
I don't think so. Yeah. As a, it's take on this debt basically.
Yeah. Take on this? Can they trade the contract? Then you would know how much they're interested in saving money.
Well, that's poor. Not poor, actually, very much not poor. Randy Dobnak was included in the Chris Paddock trade to Detroit, not because the Tigers had any idea of using him, but because then they were responsible for buying him out for $1 million, which they did last week. So it's a similar. I don't think you can basically, because they're going to be paying $10 million a year to the Astros for the next 3 years for Correa. Which I asked my co-host on Gleeman and the Geek, John Bonus, what chance he thought there was that $10 million sort of blank space for Carlos Correa would be their highest player salary for next year. And honestly, if they trade Buxton and they trade Lopez, I'm pretty certain it will be.
100% will be. Yeah.
Which would be very, very, very sad.
Blank space. I got a blank space, baby.
Yes.
We'll write your name in the line. Won't write your name in the lineup card now because he won't be here. But who in these, is nobody on that list really excited me, but they're probably not supposed to excite you. Like who feels like they could actually help? It's like Josh Bell, guys like that feel like, maybe the guy comes in, hits 25, 30 home runs, like might be someone that keeps you from bottoming out in a bad way on the field.
Yeah, I wrote that, and I'll have a pitching one, I think Monday morning, a pitching version of it. The idea is, if they are going to try to be competitive, if they're not going to trade Lopez, Ryan, Buxton, etc., then how can they at least fill in some of the blanks here with competent veterans? And I've ripped the front office plenty. They have found, Harrison Bader last offseason, 2 off seasons ago, Carlos Santana was really good. They have shown some ability in the $5 to $8 million range to find, veteran contributors on 1-year deals. So I've tried to look at, what are the holes on this team? I mean, from a lineup perspective, they need a backup catcher. They maybe need a backup shortstop. They definitely need better bats at first base and or DH. Right now, like Cody Clemens is their starting first baseman. They could use some right-handed hitting outfielders because all their corner outfielders are left-handed hitters. And so I tried to go through and say, well, here's 10 guys who would fit check those boxes, probably will require relatively cheap 1-year deals. And, inevitably all the comments are like, these are the guys Gleeman thinks are good. And it's like, no, Gleeman does not think these guys are
these
good.
Are the guys that Gleeman thinks they could potentially get. Yeah.
I mean, I can come up with a better list than this, but like I'm writing fantasy at that point.
Yes, the list of the top 10 free agents in baseball is very different than the list of the 10 free agents the Twins could go after.
Right. This was more, the 75 to 150 range of free agents, specifically first base, catcher. And so, it's I mean, look, it puts people who even cover this team into a frustrating spot because it's like, we don't know what they're doing. I mean, it leads to some speculative topics that we can talk about, but I don't want to be writing about backup catchers and $3 million, placeholder first baseman. I want to be writing about trades and signings. But the reality is it's not clear they're trying for next season and maybe 2027. And I think their moves with the 3 guys we talked about, I also think, and I'll have more on this Monday, but like how they handle or don't handle the bullpen to me might be an even bigger tell than the star trade stuff, because the star trade stuff could linger for months. We might not have an answer on that. But the bullpen thing, if they have basically no bullpen, I mean, they traded their top 5 guys. They have, Justin Topa and Cody Funderburk and Cole Sands, who, those are fine as the 5th, 6th, and 7th guy in a bullpen.
Which is what they were before they traded everybody.
Yes. And so if they don't trade for or go out and sign at least some semi-competent, average-ish veteran setup guys, and those guys typically go for $4, $5, $7 million, some even cheaper than that. If they don't make an effort to do that within the next 6 weeks, 8 weeks, I think that is itself the biggest possible tell of like they just don't care, and they would rather not spend $15 million to take the bullpen from 28th best to 20th best. And that to me, even more so, I mean, obviously the trades will be the brightest signal ever of what their intentions are. But that bullpen, because this is just not a major league caliber bullpen. We saw that down the stretch. And it's not like they have a bunch of guys coming back from injury or waiting in the wings. I'm sure they'll move a young starter or 2 to the bullpen, and they've had some success with that in the past. But I mean, you can't have Cole Sands and Justin Topa as high leverage options. So that one, I think, will tell a real story, whether they want to talk on the record about it or not, of like, do they care about this bullpen? And if they don't care about the bullpen, it's going to be a really long year. And if they do care about the bullpen, it's not going to cost you that much to, sign some competent 32-year-old, been around the block veteran setup guys.
Bullpen as canary in the coal mine. Yes. I like it. It's like it was like 32 minutes so far, and like 90% of this is negative. That's where the franchise is right now. Let's be honest, but we'll end with a little bit of an uplift. It does seem like wherever you look, the prospect ratings are pretty good. Everybody raves about Walker Jenkins. If Emmanuel Rodriguez could play a game, he'd probably be pretty good too. The pitching stalls sometimes. The injuries are such a factor. They were like, how legit is the prospect pool? When in 2026 or beyond, or at the start of the year, mid-year, end of year, later on down the road, should we expect to see some of these high-level guys? And is there is there a genuine reason for optimism when you think about the core that's down there versus the core that's here already?
Right. I mean, well, just in terms of the talent they have in the farm system, Walker Jenkins. I mean, Keishel's no longer a prospect technically, but you've seen him. He's going to be a big part. Emmanuel Rodriguez. I think Kalen Culpepper, who was their first round pick a year ago, is a consensus top 100 prospect. They have a high end talent and pretty good depth in the farm system, and then they also have guys like Keishel, who are kind of young major leaguers who I would fold into that group. They have one of the best farm systems. They have one of the best collections of 24 and under talent, let's say, if you want to fold in the young major leaguers. But it is hard to, first of all, prospects are coin flips. They go bust all the time, even the best ones. Twins have seen that. But it's also hard for fans to get emotionally invested in prospects as kind of the savior when they haven't shown an ability to develop players fully in the major leagues. I mean, that's what we opened talking about a half hour ago, is you just got through with, the Royce Lewis group and Eddie Julian and Jose Miranda and Brooks Lee and Trevor Larnach and Alex Kirilov. And it's there's been some injuries there for sure, but some of those guys looked really good in the minors and even looked really good first year or two in the majors.
Yeah.
And now we're sitting here and it's do they even have anything here? And I think it's hard without substantial changes in player development and coaching to be well, don't worry, Walker Jenkins will show up in the middle of next year and he'll be a savior. Walker Jenkins is one of the best, probably dozen prospects in baseball. And I would expect him to be in the lineup, at some point this upcoming summer, but he's going to need some help to become a superstar. It isn't just, okay, he's here, he's going to be amazing.
Right.
And, we've seen Keishel have a lot of success. The question with him is going to be sustaining it, staying healthy. That's the question with all prospects the Twins have had. I mean, even Walker Jenkins has been injured a lot. You mentioned Emmanuel Rodriguez has been injured a lot in the minors. So just in terms of talent and kind of where their farm system is perceived league wide, it's definitely top 10. I would say it's probably top 5 farm system. And the majority of the guys, including Jenkins and Rodriguez, are realistically could be part of the 2026 plans. Derek Shelton at his press conference, people were he was asked why did you want this job? And I think the second thing he said, starting pitching, which is interesting because we just talked about
good luck with that if and when. Yeah.
And then the farm system. And it's true, but my faith in their ability to develop these guys the last 20% needed to become consistent quality major leaguers is definitely pretty shaky.
Well, it hasn't been good, and that's probably, I don't know if that's exhibit A of why Baldelli's not here anymore, but you could say 2024 and then the first half of 2025, the last 2 months of 24 and the first half of 25. That's what cost Baldelli his job, and that went hand in hand with player development, because just keeping those guys on a certain level. But we'll see. I mean, and Shelton did say too, part of their job, the Twins are always going to be a team that does have to get that next 20% at the major league level. They're not going to be bringing in 28-year-old fully cooked, not cooked, but fully ready to go players. Twins might be bringing in 35-year-old mostly cooked players, but that's a different story.
The usage of cooked has changed in the 15 years we've been doing this stuff.
The parlance of our times. Yeah. Well, we'll see. And I do think too, there's that element too of the criticism that you would hear is do they try to make players, is some of the player development, you're trying to make players be what you want them to be versus what their strengths are. And I wonder if there'll be more give and take with the current regime, or if that was a fair criticism of the past regime. You got to do it this way. We want you to launch angle, this, that, and the other thing, as opposed to this guy's just a good hitter. Let's play to his strengths.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think ultimately what a lot of it boiled down to is they had a lot of guys who profiled as good hitters and questionable defenders, or guys who you could play at a certain position, but they were kind of stretched there. But then when those guys don't hit, then you just have bad players, because then they're just slow and unathletic and they can't field their position, to the level of a quality major leaguer. And I think that's what we saw with, the Larnachs and the Wallners and guys like that, Miranda, Julian, where it's when these guys are hitting really well, you can live with a couple spots on the diamond where it's we don't want a ball hit to him. But when they're hitting, average, or then last year below average, then it's well, what is this guy even? Because he doesn't field, he can't really run, he can't throw, he can't hit. And I think that's where a lot of their player development happened, which is they bank so much. And I think maybe part of this was the 2019 team, where they were let's lean into hitting homers, which is not a bad idea, by the way.
No, they're not the only team that does it. Yeah.
Right. But if you stall out in developing high-level hitters and those same guys are not, above average fielders, good athletes, then you're just left with not much. And I think that's what we saw last year, where it was like, where are they good defensively? Buxton, basically. Where are they good offensively? And there were, 2 or 3 spots, but every
Buxton,
guy that was, Buxton again, which, if they trade him, I don't know. I mean, I know that some of the like very early projections have them, how I want to closer to mediocre than maybe I have in my mind.
I think Fangraphs is like 500-ish. And I was like,
now,
okay.
First of all, those projections can be and have been wildly off
with
the Twins in recent years.
Yes, they have been.
But those, a huge portion of that, 78 wins or whatever they might project. Well, Buxton's 5.
Yeah.
Lopez is 4. Joe Ryan's 4.
Yeah.
You subtract those and you replace them with what I'm certain will be, AAA caliber guys. Well, then all of a sudden you're just back to 70 wins, which is kind of what we saw this year. Yeah. So I don't know. It's a tricky spot. And I think Shelton is fine. And Shelton will be doing more of the heavy lifting, I think, at least with hitters, than Baldelli was. But also Pittsburgh had horrible player development with hitters, especially over the last 6 years when he was there. And the truth is, like, it's no different from, a head coach in football who, if he's an offensive oriented coach, we see it with the Vikings, right?
Mm-hmm.
KOC's running the offense. He wants Flores, you run the defense. And we've seen the flip side with, Zimmer or whatever. It's like the manager of a Major League Baseball team is not the guy who's going to be in the batting cage suggesting a hitter raises his elbow or suggesting a pitcher, changes his delivery. Like, you are relying on coaches to do that. And in the minors, you're relying on player development to do that. And they've had some coaching changes, although Pete Mackey, the pitching coach, is staying. We don't know what the fate of the 3 hitting coaches are. And then also from a player development standpoint, we're not going to know for a couple months how widespread any changes they made, at Cedar Rapids or at Fort Myers or whatever. And I think, unfortunately, that plays a very big part in getting these talented guys to the majors with, processes in place that they can jump right in and succeed. And if you're counting on the manager to do that, whether it's Baldelli, whether it's Shelton, whether it's Gardenhire, Kelly, whoever, you're in a really difficult spot because that's not really part of the job description.
No, I think those guys are more tone setters than anything, but maybe the tone changes and it, something there flips. I guess mid-November, I would characterize the Twins as a shoulder shrug emoji. We still don't know. We just don't know. And it's frustrating, but maybe we'll learn more as the winter goes on. December now, I think, isn't that what Falvey said the other day? It was December. We keep moving the goalposts. Just keep moving those goalposts.
Every interview, he'll kick the can 30 days down the road. I mean, December is, the winter meetings start December 7th. And
they better know by then.
Yeah, I mean,
I
kind of hope that he's putting forth this message that he doesn't know, even though he does know. Not that I personally, I don't like being lied to, but the alternative of him really not knowing and the Pohlads and the
more concerning.
Owners really not being able to give him any marching orders would be indicative of a team that is just in absolute disarray.
Are you one of the limited partners? Do you want to break that right now? Is it you?
What does this podcast pay? Maybe I'll put that towards the...
Awesome. Hey, great stuff. Let's have you back on at some point here in the off season, maybe later on down the road when we might know a few more things, but appreciate it. Always love listening to you and following your work, Aaron. So take care. All right.
Thanks. Anytime. See you.
Thanks again to Aaron. I've known him for a while. First time on the show, but really happy to have him on. We're kind of reminiscing, talking about the time when I tried to bring my baby daughter to Liquor Lyle's to watch a World Cup soccer game. He was there. A bunch of other friends were there. They wouldn't let me in with I think she was probably like 4 months old at the time. Wouldn't let me in. I'm like, why not? Like, this is just like, we've brought her to like restaurants, bars before. I guess Liquor Lyle's was a little bit different at the time, but we were reminiscing because that daughter is now in middle school and he could not believe that. But good to catch up with Aaron. Good to talk Twins with him. I knew something was going to happen in the interim between us talking and this going live. That did happen. So let's finish with the cooler. Twins, according to our Bobby Nightingale, hiring their 3rd lead hitting coach in the last 3 years. 2 people familiar with the hire saying Keith Beauregard, formerly of Detroit and other places, but Detroit most recently, will join the staff as the lead hitting coach. Their 2 assistant hitting coaches staying on from the Rocco Baldelli era. So Bobby reporting that in the Star Tribune. Bobby will be on next week, by the way, to talk Twins. He's been having a great run of reporting from GM meetings and everything like that, Twins managerial search, things like that. So I want to get his perspectives as well. But new hitting coach. We'll see how that approach affects both both the established young hitters that they're trying to get to turn the corner, and also those young players that Aaron and I talked about as well. It's going to be a busy weekend, man. Gophers football tonight at Oregon. Wolves tonight. They got those Prince-themed jerseys, Prince-themed court ready to roll tonight. Wild have 2 games this weekend. I think the Wolves have a back-to-back too. I think they have Denver tomorrow, Sacramento tonight, Vikings on Sunday. Man, it's a busy weekend. It's jam-packed after some well-deserved rest here. So stick around for all of that. Sunday, I'll be doing a post-game podcast, I believe, after Vikings-Bears. And Monday with Royce. All sorts of good stuff planned next week. Like I said, John Marthaler, I think. Bobby Nightingale Jr. on next week. I think we'll do some Gopher football talk, our usual film review. So next week filling up nicely already. Until then, I am Michael Rand. Have a great rest of your Friday and weekend. Back at it again with that post game on Sunday.